Well, welcome everyone to this episode of The Elevator. Very special guest, Baroness Verma, with me. Now, you will know that The Elevator is about people who've managed to elevate themselves and, equally importantly, elevate those around her. So my first question to the Baroness has to be, you were born in India. You came here as a child, went on to become a government minister, member of the House of Lords. You're a parliamentarian, your own business. Is it really that easy? You just got to be born in India and you just come over and you're a woman, ethnic minority, but you make it look easy. What's everybody else complaining about?
Well, Alpesh, first of all, I came here as a baby, so I celebrated my first birthday here. So I see myself as predominantly British, but had the good fortune to be born in India. And what that makes you do is actually think about what you've left to what you've come to and the opportunities that you have here that you might not have had there. And I think it's really important to remember that all of these stories that you see of success, behind it are minutes, hours, days, weeks of hard work. Sweat and tears is often the story maker behind all of these stories.
Well, you would have, and on all this, delving deeper into the sweat and tears, you wouldn't have had the networks, and you're from Leicester. So we're not talking about, landed in Mayfair with generations of networks and supports and, Lord and Lady this to open doors for you. So how did it come about? I mean, what's the message to those who think they're disenfranchised, who think they're excluded because they don't have access? What's the message you'd give them?
So I think the important thing is, first of all, you need to be clear about where you want to go. And the second thing is be realistic that there are going to be challenges and there are going to be people that are going to block the way, deliberately or non-deliberately, but they will be there. And I think if you believe enough in what you want to do, the opportunities are always there in front of you. I mean, I always used to say to my children, you'll always have two doors. You've just got to decide which one you want to go through. And it may not always be the right one, but actually, at the end of the day, I'll take you to your destination. But you've got to be the one who's got to actually make the choice. And I worked on the basis that, there were always going to be people who were going to stop me. And there were always going to be people who were going to, because of my race, because of my gender, there are always going to be people who are going to say, no, you can't do this because. And it's always the because that used to wind me up. There was never a real reason for it. It was just because. And so I learned, I'm 5'2.5" tall, so I'm not very tall. The one thing that God gifted me was a loud voice. And I used my loud voice. And I actually, to be quite frank, in my life, have had some brilliant mentors. And there's no shortage of them. If you seek out people to help you along on your journey, they will help you. For every 9 people that want to stop you, there's always that brilliant one person that will help you. Now, Leicester was one of the most racist cities in the country when I was growing up. So I was battle hardened from word go. Go to school, you're going to be called names. Go outside, you're going to be called names. You go to the Asian community, you're a dark-skinned Indian. You're called names. I mean, it was nonsense, but that's how it was, and you grew up with it. But what it does make you do is fight back. And so I would say to everybody that however difficult it looks, if you want something, you've just got to make sure that you're resilient enough not to fail and say, okay, I failed and I don't want to go again because it hurts and it's too painful. Actually, you failed the first time. What lessons did you learn from it? What actually did you take away? That's the thing that will get you on the next ladder, the step of the ladder, because you won't make that mistake again for sure.
That's phenomenal. And that word resilience, to continue going forward. Now, you mentioned mentors. How did you find them? Was it luck? Is there some way of getting mentors? We're often asked that. People say, well, how do I get a mentor?
So I think, I'm a brilliant networker. I say it myself, but I am. I'm really good at networking. I like to go to events. And even when I used to go to family events, your conversation people will say, what do you want to do? And then they'll say, well, how are you going to do it? And if somebody's got something or an access to something, then you need to say, well, will you help me? I need to get through that door. How do I do it? So I have been lucky. I must admit, I have been very, very lucky. And I think it's because I'm not frightened of asking. And I'm also not frightened of saying, you know, this might sound stupid, but actually I want to know the answer. And often everybody else wants to know the answer, but they just don't want to say what the question is because it might sound so stupid. And I got involved with lots of things. I mean, I was 22 years old when I got involved with the first women's refuge here, looking after people suffering domestic abuse. So it opens up your networks to a whole world that you didn't know existed. And from there, you learned the confidence to be able to go on and do other things. So, you know, I was one of the youngest members on a regeneration plan in Leicester. And I was invited on there, and I looked around at all of these senior figures thinking, what would I know? How could I contribute? But actually, they were brilliant. They said, we want to hear it from a young person's perspective. That was when I was young, of course, quite some years ago.
Still are. You got the energy of a young person, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, and to be quite frank, I am aging rather well. But, but that's because...
Genes.
Pardon?
Indian genes.
Indian genes, yeah. It's all the papaya and pineapple I eat in the mornings. But I think the point is that I was never resistant to somebody saying to me, would you like us to help you? And I would take away what I needed from it. And I think the best thing for everyone is what's available, take it and make it your own.
That's all actually very, very good advice indeed. And I've seen when I've been on those ministerial trips with you, you will, doesn't matter, you know, who the minister is on the other side, you will be direct, frank, and you will say, I want your help with, we want to do this for the United Kingdom, and, you know, Mr. Minister from India or wherever else, we want your help to achieve those goals. And it's disarming because the other side, like you said, when you ask for help, people do want to actually give it as well. Let me move then in terms of the work you do with, you mentioned Women's Refuge. Now, the work you do with United Nations Women, and more generally, how you've been helping uplift others, elevate others. Tell me a bit about that work, what got you involved and what it's meant for you.
Well, I think, look, growing up as an Asian girl in the 60s and 70s was tough because everything you wanted to do, the answer was always no. And that's because of the culture we came from, basically, at the time. The great thing now is, of course, we're encouraging our young people to go out there and explore the world and find experiences that maybe we would have never had dreamt of in my own growing up. However, I do also think that there are a lot of opportunities there that people don't always know about. And the great thing for me has been that being in politics has opened a hell of a lot of new doors. And I don't want to be the only person knowing about those doors. And when I was invited on to be chair of UN Women, I took it because I believe that these are global organizations where you can actually make a difference, not just for women in the UK, but actually have a big footprint globally. And I did the work for David Cameron when he was Prime Minister as the champion for violence against women and girls across the world. So I've got some history behind it. I also think that each person you give a helping hand to, regardless of it being a man or a woman, they should have the duty to help somebody else. But if you can show them how you can do it, and it's quite easy, there's no difficulties behind it, you know, share your black book. I'm always sharing my black book. I mean, it's there for everyone to know. If they've got somebody in there that they need to access, I'll help them access them. I set up Powerful Women when I was Energy Minister, and that's beginning to change the whole landscape of how women are getting senior roles within the energy sector. Sadly, I think for me, is that there are not enough people from the BME community in the energy sector at senior level. And so as a minister, I'd be the only female in the room. But can you imagine being the only female of colour in the room? So, you know, I decided that I needed to take some action, and I'm not short of taking decisions that bring change, and I just took them. I think you've got to, I just want to say to everybody who's listening today, it's easy to wait for somebody else to come and do it for you. And sometimes just raising your head above the parapet, you might take a few missiles, but you'll survive it. Because all you've got to do is lob a few back. And, you know, people will respect you for it. And so whether it's UN Women, where we're making a huge difference across the globe in the programs we're doing for women and girls, particularly trying to access finance, particularly trying to make sure that the spaces they operate in are safe, you know, they are life-changing events for those people. It was a life-changing event for me. I mean, you know, come on, from a very conservative household, getting married very early on in my life, having 2 children before the age of 22, you know, you've suddenly got lots of challenges, but wow, does it throw up a load of opportunities as well?
You're right. I mean, in terms of when you consider the family life as well and the background and how it could have been a hindrance, I mean, what I'm taking from this is it's that attitude, that sort of that bullish attitude that you're going to knock through any obstacle in your way. Whereas the rest of us would tend to be, oh God, do I need this headache? Whereas yours is, no, I've got a goal, I'm going to cross over it. You mentioned powerful women, you mentioned UN Women, and just getting on with things, just doing the execution, just getting out there and making it happen. There's a lot of people right now, obviously, who, especially with COVID and everything else going on, are feeling battered and bruised, if not physically, at least, you know, obviously metaphorically, with everything going on. How do they muster that up? How do they muster up that energy?
Well, I think, look, I mean, I'm in Leicester at the moment, and, you know, this is the only city so far that's gone into a second lockdown. And it's desperate for people. I mean, genuinely is. But the big the story that's running around at the moment from Leicester is the modern day slavery.
Yeah.
And, you know, and to be in a city which once was amongst the best cities in the world for textiles, to now be labelled a sweatshop city, you know, it's quite devastating. And those people working in those places are now probably thinking, how on earth are they going to manage jobs? Because those factories may just disappear. Those jobs may disappear. Well, they rightly should disappear unless they're being paid the proper wage. But I think for everyone who thinks that there's nothing around the corner, sometimes, Alpesh, we have to sit back and actually ask ourselves, what is it we really, really want to do? And how do we make the opportunities to work for us? Because we limit ourselves. I mean, I've always said to people, you know, somebody said, what's a great leader? And I said, the great leaders are that when they look behind them, there's a long line of people wanting to follow them. And yet a bad leader is one who looks back and there's nobody there. And I think it's the same in your attitude to life. If you want something, you can't wait for it to happen to you. You've got to actually look at all the opportunities. It may be hard journeys upwards. I mean, I can't say that my journey has been an easy one, because I had no contacts within the political world, and yet I'm probably one of the most recognized Asian faces within politics. In business, I came in at age 19, and I was turned away from trying to get bank loans because I was 19 and an Asian girl, and I was told to either bring back my husband or my father for a bank loan. You know, but you meet those challenges and say, okay, well, how do I address them? And then once I've addressed them, how do I make it that it doesn't happen to somebody else? So I think there's a lot in your own hands, and friendships and relationships are key. And I am the biggest believer that if you are able to reach out and make relationships with people who will help you on your journey, and you don't forget that, so that when they reach back to you for somebody else, you will find your dreams do actually come true. You've just got to have the tenacity to not stop believing in yourself. And it may be that it starts with a very little step. You know, those small steps actually can lead to great big strides. Yeah. But it's taking that first step, I think.
Yeah. And it gives you that momentum, that energy, which feeds on and that next step and that next step. Mm. Now, you're graciously on the advisory board for City Hindus Network as well. How has faith played as a dimension in getting, you know, in your day-to-day life, you know, not just as a parliamentarian, but also, you know, what you're doing with UN Women, and what you're doing with the award ceremonies you've created to give awards to not the same old names, but actually the unsung heroes, just every aspect of your life when you're elevating others. Has there been an element of faith within that?
Absolutely. the core part of my whole being has been the strength of my faith. And remember, I come from a Sikh faith and I'm married into a Hindu faith. But for me, it's one of the same. I don't see any separation of it. I just see that it's been a strengthening of my character. But I tell you, the strongest thing is that I wake up in the morning knowing that there's a stronger being that's looking over me. And that when I sometimes have those dark moments and I need to sit back and reflect, that moment of faith comes in and puts me right back on track again.
No, that's I think that's really important for us as a message, that it's not just about the work. There's a bigger purpose, a bigger fulfillment. And I've seen that when we visited in Uttar Pradesh, when we visited the smallest of villages, and the work you were doing as energy minister and driving those, there weren't cameras there, not journalists. You're in a small sort of hut where there's the ladies are making the food and they're being covered in smoke because that's the way it is, but you're bringing that change there to fuel it. And there's the bigger purpose. What's next for you? What's next? You can't be Prime Minister from the Lords, I don't think. I think they stopped doing that a while back.
No. And you know what? There are so many more important things than being the sort of visible leader from the front. I mean, for me, the really important thing now is next gen. Where are they? Where's the succession? Where's the legacy going to be? Where are those people that are going to take these arguments, these aspirations forward? It's people like in City Hindu Network. It's those young people, those brilliant young minds. It's all that energy that actually, when it comes together as a collective force, is world changing. And I think we often forget how much we can change everything from a negative to a positive if we learn to work together. Each of us has got individual strengths. And so my job now is to carry on shaking the rafters. I don't like status quo, I will always shake it. But it's also to ensure that those people who are our next generation of thinkers have access to the opportunities that maybe some of us have not had. And so that the journey becomes easier for the generation after them. That's where we should be.
Baroness Verma, no, thank you very much. I've worked with you for, I think, at least a decade now on charitable projects, ministerial stuff, and it's astounded me, your capability to get results. You're very much results focused. I really appreciate you doing this program for us. And I think the message also goes out, not just to City Hindus, but actually more broadly, the city more broadly, professionals more broadly, and those, most importantly, those who are having the toughest of times at the moment as well. So I think your message was loud and clear on all of that. And I want to thank you for taking the time to be part of this. Thank you so much.
And it's been brilliant. Thank you.